I never thought I'd have to teach my 10-year-old daughter about betrayal. I whispered, staring at the documents spread across the bank manager's desk. The representative's sympathetic expression did nothing to ease the weight crushing my chest as she slid another statement forward. Mrs. Collins, there's something else you need to see. I'm Hazel, 34 years old, and until 4 days ago, I thought I understood what stability meant. After watching my own family crumble under financial strain when I was 15, I'd spent my entire adult life seeking security. Working part-time at a medical office, raising my daughter Lily, supporting my husband Brian's career in software development, I'd built what I believed was an unshakable foundation. How wrong I was. According to our records, the representative continued, her voice carefully measured, there are 5 credit cards in your name, Mrs. Collins. The total outstanding balance is $50,000, and they're all 3 months past due. My hands trembled as I flipped through the statements. This isn't possible. I only have 1 credit card, and I barely use it. Your signatures are on all the applications. She pointed to a series of signatures that looked vaguely like mine, but with subtle differences that made my stomach twist. Your husband added you as an authorized user. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Just 4 days ago, Brian had packed a single suitcase, kissed Lily goodbye while I was at the grocery store, and left a note on our kitchen counter, found someone who appreciates me. Don't try to contact me. We'll call about divorce proceedings. Now, as the bank representative explained my limited options, debt consolidation, payment plans, possible bankruptcy, the full extent of Brian's betrayal began to take shape. He hadn't just abandoned our marriage, he had deliberately set me up for financial ruin. My mind flashed back to that day 19 years ago, when I'd found my mother crying over bank statements at our kitchen table. Dad's gambling debts had finally caught up with them. Within months, we'd lost everything, our house, our stability, my parents' marriage. I'd sworn then that I would never let money destroy my life the way it had destroyed theirs. I'd met Brian in college. He seemed perfect, intelligent, ambitious, protective. After my chaotic childhood with a struggling single mother, I craved stability. Brian offered that, along with what I thought was love. We married quickly when I got pregnant with Lily, and I put my nursing prerequisites on hold to support his career in tech. But Brian's protective nature slowly morphed into control. He managed all finances, questioned my friendships, and discouraged my education plans. You don't want our daughter raised by strangers, do you? He'd say. I adapted, believing his excuses because facing the truth meant admitting my safe harbor had become a cage. Gradually, we became increasingly isolated. There had been warning signs, of course. The unexplained late nights at work. The password-protected second phone he claimed was for client emergencies only. The way he'd quickly minimize his computer screen when I entered his home office. The growing emotional distance despite his continued control over nearly every aspect of our lives. 2 years ago, I'd found a receipt for an expensive restaurant on a night he'd claimed to be working late. When confronted, Brian had turned it around so skillfully that I ended up apologizing for doubting him. I was planning a surprise anniversary dinner, he'd said, his expression wounded. I was scouting locations, and now you've ruined it. Why can't you trust me, Hazel? I never saw that anniversary dinner. Instead, I received a bracelet ordered online, delivered to our door in a brown box. But I convinced myself it was my fault, that my suspicion had ruined his grand plans. I worked harder to be the wife and mother he wanted, silencing the small voice inside that whispered something was wrong. Even now, with 5 maxed-out credit cards in my name and a goodbye note on the counter, part of me wondered if there was something I could have done differently to prevent this outcome. My phone buzzed, startling me from my thoughts. A text from an unknown number, Hazel, this is Vanessa. Brian told me you were controlling and financially abusive, but now I'm seeing things differently. Call me if you want to know what he's been hiding. Vanessa. The name Brian had whispered in his sleep twice last month. The name I'd pretended not to hear, convincing myself it was nothing. The knot in my stomach tightened. Whatever Brian had been hiding, I suspected the credit card debt was just the beginning. Mrs. Collins? The bank representative's voice pulled me back to the present. There's one more thing you should know. According to our records, a home equity line of credit was taken out against your property 3 months ago. The amount is $35,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. Our modest home, the one thing I thought might provide stability for Lily, was now leveraged to the hilt. And worse, the first large payment on the equity line was due in 2 weeks. Mom? Are you okay? I quickly wiped the tears from my cheeks before turning to face Lily, who stood in the doorway of the bank office in her school uniform. Her expression was far too serious for a 10-year-old, her eyes holding a wisdom that made my heart ache. Just some grown-up stuff, sweetie. You should be waiting in the lobby. Lily approached cautiously. It's about Dad, isn't it? And money? I heard you on the phone yesterday, and I saw the bank papers on the table. I hesitated, torn between protecting her and being honest. Dad told me before he left that you might be sad for a while because of financial issues, she continued. He said it wasn't his fault. Anger flared in my chest at Brian's attempt to shape Lily's understanding of his abandonment. How dare he try to poison our daughter against me before disappearing? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa, I understand if you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But Brian has been lying to both of us. I can prove it. Looking at my daughter's concerned face, I made a decision. I'd spent years trying to protect her from the kind of pain I'd experienced as a teenager. But maybe what she needed now wasn't protection, but truth. Lily, sweetheart, I said, taking her hand. There's something we need to talk about. Something about Dad, and about being strong when people let you down. The bank representative quietly excused herself, giving us privacy. As I held my daughter close, I could feel her small frame trembling slightly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Don't worry, Mom. We'll figure it out together. In that moment, looking into my daughter's determined eyes, I felt something shift inside me. The fear and shame began to transform into something else, resolve. Brian hadn't just betrayed me, he'd betrayed our daughter. And I would make damn sure he didn't get away with it. Almost against my will, I found myself dialing Vanessa's number. It was time to uncover exactly what my husband had been hiding. Almost against my will, I found myself dialing Vanessa's number. The line rang 3 times before a young voice answered, tinged with a slight southern accent. Hazel? I wasn't sure you'd call. You said you had proof of Brian's lies, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm listening. What followed was a 30-minute conversation that shattered any remaining illusions I had about my marriage. Vanessa was 26, a graphic designer who had met Brian in an online gaming forum 9 months ago. Their relationship had evolved quickly, with Brian painting himself as an unhappily married man trapped by a controlling, financially irresponsible wife. He told me you had gambling debts, Vanessa said, her voice cracking. That you'd maxed out credit cards behind his back, and he was working extra jobs to cover it. He said you monitored his calls and emails, so we had to be careful about communication. None of that is true, I whispered, watching Lily through the doorway as she concentrated on her homework. I work. He controlled all our money. And now I'm discovering credit cards in my name that I never applied for. I'm so sorry, Vanessa replied, genuine remorse in her voice. I believed him completely until yesterday when I found some inconsistencies in his stories. Then I discovered his laptop open and saw emails about transferring money from joint accounts. When I questioned him, he got defensive and finally admitted he'd been creative with some details about your relationship. My hands were shaking by the time we finished talking. Vanessa had sent screenshots of their conversations, including ones where Brian detailed plans to leave me with the debt while starting fresh with her. He had systematically withdrawn money from our modest savings account over the past 6 months. There were even messages about blocking my access to friends and family who might help me, a strategy to ensure I'd have nowhere to turn once he left. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my husband's calculated betrayal, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The protective walls I'd built around our little family had turned out to be a prison designed by the very person I trusted to keep us safe. That evening, my phone pinged with a text from Brian, "Got your things from my office. Set them on the porch. Take them before tomorrow. My throat tightened. My family photos, the small cactus I'd kept on my desk, the coffee mug Lily had made for me, all reduced to a box of discarded possessions. But it wasn't the items themselves that made my hands shake as I drove to retrieve them. It was what this errand might reveal about Brian's new life. The house was dark when I pulled up, but a sleek red sports car I didn't recognize sat in the driveway. As I approached the porch, the front door opened. A young woman stepped out, tall, blonde, designer clothes. She looked exactly like the type of woman Brian had always claimed wasn't his type. "You must be Hazel," she said, her voice different from Vanessa's. "Not Southern. Sharp. Metropolitan. I'm Charlotte. Brian's at a meeting." My mind raced. Not Vanessa. Another woman. How many were there? "I'll just get my things," I managed, reaching for the box. "You know," Charlotte said, blocking my path slightly, "Brian told me about your issues. The spending, the control. I think it's brave of him to finally break free." The audacity of her words, the casual cruelty, sparked something in me. I straightened up, meeting her gaze directly. "Did he tell you about the $50,000 in fraudulent credit cards? Or the home equity loan he took out without my knowledge? Has he asked you to be an authorized user on any accounts yet?" Charlotte's perfectly composed expression flickered. "You're lying. Brian said you'd try to turn people against him." I pulled out my phone, pulled up the bank statements. "Would you like to see the proof? Or maybe you'd like to talk to Vanessa. She has quite a story too." The color drained from Charlotte's face. "Vanessa who?" "Ask Brian," I said, picking up my box. "Ask him about his other girlfriend in Nashville. Ask him about the forged signatures. Ask him about the money he's been moving offshore. Then maybe consider why a successful software developer would need to take out so many loans." I was halfway to my car when Charlotte called out, "Wait." I turned. Her confident pose had crumbled, uncertainty creeping into her expression. "The loans, what do you mean?" "Like I said, ask Brian. But you might want to check your own credit report first." The drive home was a blur, adrenaline coursing through my veins. For the first time since finding Brian's note, I felt something other than fear and despair. I felt powerful. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove Lily to school, fighting back tears as I watched her walk through the doors. She was the only good thing to come from my marriage, and I was determined to protect her from the worst of this situation. Back home, I began methodically documenting everything. I printed Vanessa's screenshots, gathered bank statements, and made notes about Brian's controlling behaviors over the years. If this was heading toward divorce, I needed evidence. But even as I assembled my case, a crushing reality settled over me. I had no money for a lawyer, no family nearby to help, and few friends left after years of Brian's subtle isolation tactics. By noon, overwhelmed and desperate, I called the one person who had tried to maintain contact despite Brian's disapproval, my former college roommate Diana. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years, not since Brian had claimed she'd made inappropriate comments about our marriage during her last visit. "Hazel?" Diana's surprise was evident in her voice. "Is everything okay?" "No," I admitted, and once I started talking, everything poured out: Brian's abandonment, the credit card debt, the revelations from Vanessa, the encounter with Charlotte. Diana listened without interruption until I finally ran out of words. "That manipulative bastard," she said with quiet fury. "Listen to me, Hazel. I'm coming over tonight, and I'm bringing help. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling. Brian worked hard to cut you off from support, but he didn't succeed completely. There are people who care about you and Lily." That evening, Diana arrived with a woman she introduced as Catherine, a family law attorney. "I can't afford a lawyer," I said immediately. Catherine smiled. "Diana and I go way back. Consider this initial consultation a favor. We'll figure out the rest as we go." For the next 2 hours, Catherine reviewed my documents and outlined potential approaches. She explained that while I might be liable for some of the credit card debt as Brian's spouse, there were options for contesting fraudulent charges and signatures. She suggested filing for an emergency hearing to freeze our remaining assets and potentially get temporary support for Lily. For the first time since finding Brian's note, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe with proper legal guidance, I could navigate this crisis without losing everything. That hope was short-lived. The following day, I received an email from Brian. "I've spoken with a lawyer. Since you've been an authorized user on all accounts and benefited from the purchases, you're equally responsible for the debt. I've also documented your refusal to work full-time as evidence of your financial dependence. I'm willing to let you keep the house if you assume all outstanding debts. My lawyer will be in touch with formal papers." Panic rose in my throat. Catherine had warned me about this possibility, that Brian might try to offload the debt entirely. Without full-time income or assets, I couldn't possibly manage the mortgage plus $50,000 in credit card payments. I forwarded the email to Catherine, who called me immediately. "This is a scare tactic," she assured me. "He's hoping you'll panic and agree to unfavorable terms. But we need to move quickly. I've been doing some digging, and there's something interesting about the timing of those credit card applications." She explained that all 5 cards had been opened within a 2-week period, just after Brian had started a new project at work. A project that, according to his company's public announcements, involves significant overseas travel. "I think we should look into his work expenses during that time," Catherine said. Something doesn't add up. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat down at my computer to gather more financial documentation. What I found sent ice through my veins. Brian hadn't just maxed out credit cards. In addition to the $35,000 home equity line of credit, he'd also taken out a personal loan using my social security number. The money was gone, withdrawn in cash increments just small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. Our modest home, the one thing I thought might provide stability for Lily, was now leveraged to the hilt. As I stared at the screen, a new email notification popped up. From Charlotte. "We need to talk. In person. It's important." The time had come to start fighting back. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Charlotte walked in, her designer confidence noticeably dimmed. She slid into the booth across from me, hands wrapped around an untouched latte. "I found something in Brian's office last night," she said without preamble. "Account statements, offshore transfers, and other women. Not just Vanessa. At least 3 others." I waited, letting the silence do its work. "He's been running the same scheme with all of us," Charlotte continued, her voice tight. "Getting us to take out loans, add him to our accounts. I checked my credit report like you suggested. There are 2 credit cards I never applied for." "How much?" $30,000. Plus a personal loan he convinced me to take out for his startup investment. Another $40,000. She laughed bitterly. "I'm an investment banker. I should have known better." "He's good at what he does," I said. "Making smart women feel stupid is his specialty." Charlotte pulled out a USB drive. "I made copies of everything. Account numbers, transfer records, emails to all of us. There's more, something about his company's overseas accounts. I think he's been embezzling." My phone buzzed. "Catherine, my lawyer." I held up a finger to Charlotte and answered. "Hazel, we found something. Brian's company is doing an internal audit. Apparently, large sums have been disappearing from their international development fund. The timing matches perfectly with our credit card investigation." I looked at Charlotte's USB drive and smiled. "I think I might have some evidence they'd be interested in." As I was leaving the coffee shop, feeling a sense of momentum finally building in our favor, a sharp voice cut through the air. "You manipulative little witch. You've ruined my son's life." Eleanor, Brian's mother, stood blocking my path. Her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer suit couldn't mask the fury in her eyes. She must have been watching the coffee shop, waiting for this moment. "Your precious son ruined his own life," I replied, trying to move past her. "Lies. She stepped closer, her manicured finger jabbing the air. Brian told me everything. How you spent his money, how you turned his daughter against him. And now I see you conspiring with his girlfriend. You planned this, didn't you? Turned these women against him? Charlotte, who had followed me out, stepped forward. Mrs. Collins, I'm not Brian's girlfriend. I'm one of the women he defrauded. And I have proof. Eleanor's face contorted. More lies. I won't let you destroy our family name. I'll fight you both. Security approached from the coffee shop, but Eleanor's declaration of war had been made. The next morning, I received notice that she had filed for grandparents' rights, claiming I was an unfit mother who had alienated Lily from her father's family. She was also contesting the house's ownership, claiming Brian had used his inheritance for the down payment. What followed was a whirlwind of legal activity. Catherine's team worked through the night, compiling evidence from Charlotte's documents and the company audit. By morning, we had a complete picture of Brian's scheme: systematic fraud across multiple women's accounts, corporate embezzlement masked as project expenses, and a complex web of offshore transfers. But Eleanor's attack added a new dimension to our battle. While we were in Catherine's office reviewing court documents, Lily called from school. Mom? Her voice was small. Grandma Eleanor is here. She's talking to my principal. My heart stopped. Stay in your classroom, sweetie. Don't go anywhere. I'm calling the police right now. By the time I arrived at the school, Eleanor was being escorted out by officers, but the damage was done. She had tried to convince the principal that I was mentally unstable, that Brian's fraud charges were my fabrication, that she should be given temporary custody of Lily. That evening, I found Lily sitting in her room, surrounded by old family photos. Mom? Her voice wavered. Grandma Eleanor said something about you ending up like Grandma Rose, your mom. That you'd abandon me too. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd felt before. Eleanor hadn't just attacked me, she'd gone after my daughter's sense of security, using my own painful family history as a weapon. But Lily wasn't finished. I recorded everything, she said, pulling out her phone. Her eyes showed a flash of pride. Remember how you taught me to always keep records when something feels wrong? Well. She hesitated, then played the recording. I got her to talk about the bank accounts she helped Dad set up. I knew if she was really innocent, she wouldn't know so many details. My clever, resilient daughter had once again proven stronger than anyone expected. The evidence was damning. Eleanor had helped Brian open accounts using fake documents. She'd served as a reference for loans obtained under false pretenses. And now she'd violated court orders by approaching Lily at school. The judge's response was swift and severe. Eleanor was charged as an accomplice in the fraud. Her assets were frozen. The restraining order was extended to include her, and her petition for grandparents' rights was rejected. But Eleanor had one last card to play. Through her society connections, she began spreading vicious rumors about me in the community. Parents at Lily's school started whispering. Invitations to playdates dried up. That's when Charlotte proved her worth as more than just a fellow victim. Using her banking connections, she uncovered a trail of similar schemes in Eleanor's past. This wasn't the first time mother and son had worked together to defraud people. However, no matter how helpful her evidence was, it didn't change the fact that she had betrayed both my husband and me. After the trial, we never spoke again. The final courtroom scene was electric. Brian was sentenced first, 15 years in federal prison for multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and attempted kidnapping. Then came Vanessa's turn, 10 years for her role as a professional conspirator in multiple fraud schemes. Finally, Eleanor faced justice. 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud, plus permanent financial monitoring. As she was led away in handcuffs, her perfectly maintained facade cracked completely. This isn't over, she snarled. When I get out. When you get out, I interrupted calmly, Lily will be in college. I'll have my master's degree. And you'll still be nothing but a convicted felon. 2 months later, I received 3 letters, one from Brian, claiming his mother's influence had corrupted him, one from Eleanor, still threatening revenge, and one from Vanessa, offering to tell the real story in exchange for support at her parole hearing. I filed them all in a folder labeled Past Mistakes and turned my attention to what mattered, Lily's school awards ceremony, where she was being honored for her essay on integrity and justice. That evening, celebrating with our true family, Diana, Catherine, and other friends who'd stood by us from the start, I realized something profound. The people who had tried to destroy us had inadvertently helped us build a stronger, more genuine family than we'd ever had before. 2 years after the trials, I stood in my new office at the medical center, adjusting the freshly hung diploma on the wall, my master's degree in healthcare administration. The window offered a stunning view of the city where I'd once felt so trapped. Now, as department director, I saw it differently, a landscape of possibilities. Mom. You won't believe what happened. Lily burst into the office, her private school uniform neat despite her obvious excitement. At 12, she'd grown into a confident, vibrant teenager. I got selected for the Young Leaders Summit. And guess what? My essay about financial literacy and family justice is going to be published in the National Journal. I hugged her tightly, remembering the quiet, worried child she'd been just 2 years ago. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. The summit organizers said my perspective on family resilience was especially insightful, Lily grinned. All those lessons about staying strong really paid off. After the trials, we'd naturally drifted away from those who'd been involved in the case, preferring to build our new life with those who'd been there from the beginning. Some bridges, once crossed, are better left behind. Speaking of celebrations, I said, don't forget we're meeting Diana and the others for dinner tonight. It's a special occasion. Because of the house? Lily's eyes sparkled. Because of everything. That evening, we gathered at an upscale restaurant, a far cry from the days when we'd feared losing everything. Diana, Catherine, and several other friends who'd become family sat around a table laden with gourmet food and champagne. To the final payment. Diana raised her glass. The house is now completely yours, free and clear. Everyone cheered. Using my new salary and the restitution payments from the seized assets, I'd managed to pay off both the mortgage and all remaining debts. And to our rising star. Catherine lifted her glass to Lily. The youngest author ever featured in the Civic Justice Review. Your article about family resilience is going to help so many others. Lily blushed, but sat straighter in her chair. Her article about building support networks had already resonated with many children facing similar family crises. You know what I love most about this gathering? Diana looked around the table. Every woman here has turned her pain into power. Our careers, our advocacy, our friendship. Later that night, as Lily and I walked through our front garden, now blooming with roses she'd planted herself, she asked, do you ever wonder about Dad and Grandma Eleanor? No, I answered honestly. They're part of our past, not our future. Good, she nodded. Because I was thinking, maybe we could start offering summer workshops for kids whose parents are going through stuff like we did? The Crisis Center said they'd support it. My heart swelled with pride. My daughter, turning her experiences into help for others. That evening, as we sat on our patio watching the sunset, Lily worked on her laptop while I reviewed patient care proposals. Mom, she said suddenly. Remember when you told me sometimes the happy ending isn't about forgiveness? I do. You were right. It's about becoming so strong that the bad stuff doesn't matter anymore. She turned her laptop to show me her screen. Look, I started a blog for kids like me. It's called Rising Higher. I read the tagline she'd written, sometimes the best revenge is living your best life. Looking at my daughter, confident, compassionate, and wise beyond her years, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had not just survived, we had transformed. Our house was no longer a cage built by deception, but a home filled with love and purpose. Our lives were no longer defined by what we'd lost, but by what we'd built. And somewhere in their prison cells, those who had tried to destroy us could only watch as we soared, surrounded by genuine love and support.